the inferior superior, right? It's the idea of you feeling the need to be superior, right? In our deposition example, you feel the need to be superior to the second year associate because you're now a fifth year associate. However, if you just stop for a moment and stop the comparison, what you'll recognize is what you need is strategic help on a topic, and this person who might have fewer years of experience is the perfect one suited to help you. Hi, everybody. It's Allison Williams here. Welcome to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where today we are going to talk about the inferior superior. What do I mean by that? You're going to find out. Just stay tuned. So here's the thing. We are in an interesting state of the world right now, right? There's a lot of things going on that are causing a lot of uncertainty. And one of the things that I know that does to individuals, to humans, is that whenever there's uncertainty in the air, there oftentimes can become internal uncertainty. And that really does trigger the inferior superior, which is the reason why I want to talk about this on today's episode. So, what do I mean by inferior superior? Well, the first thing I want to say is that when I'm talking about this category of person, recognize that all people have the ability to become this category of person, no matter their station in life, no matter whether they are a leader, a manager, or a doer in an organization. It is a common phenomena that happens out of the ego and out of the need for individuals to feel superior to someone and or something. Now, you might say, I don't have a superiority complex. That could never be me. But the reality is that when we are aiming to create more in our life, and that applies to all of you who are growth-minded law firm owners who want to create bigger, better, stronger, more durable, more profitable, more successful businesses. However you define success, you're going to likely encounter this phenomena in yourself, whether you recognize it or not. So I want to bring it to your attention, not because I think it's something that you need to proactively work on right this moment, but because I want you to recognize it in yourself and in others. And I'm going to give you some strategies on how to deal with it. So first of all, the thing that I want to start this conversation off with is the topic of self-sabotage, right? So we all have done this before, where we are on a path, we are creating and growing and building, and we're really excited about all the things that we are able to accomplish, especially when you're a newer business owner and you get that first really high income client, or you win that first high profile case, or you get media coverage for the first time, or perhaps it's something that is a regular, ordinary course of business type of thing, but it's the first time you do it. Like the first time you sign up for a 401k, or the first time you hire an employee who's making a multiple six-figure income, or the first time that you have to fire someone, right? That kind of puts you in the mode of, oh, I'm doing the thing, right? I'm now a real business owner because I did that thing. But one of the things that I think happens when we start to make major moves and we start getting real traction in business is we oftentimes get scared. And we aren't necessarily able to put a voice to it. We just start to suddenly see problems everywhere. And those problems point us in the direction of going away from our goal, right? Our goal is over here. We're going in the opposite direction. And we are able to rationalize going in the opposite direction because of external factors that we think are beyond our control. Like, I can't possibly hire another person because the last 3 people I hired did not work out. So that means I can't hire good people. Or I can't possibly rebrand our company and attract a different kind of client because the last time I did a rebrand, I started driving in clients that I didn't want. So I know rebranding doesn't work, right? You write a universal story to a specific situation and then you run with it. And that is oftentimes a key sign that we are in a mode of self-sabotage. So I want to, kind of acquaint you with the idea of self-sabotage. And oftentimes it shows up in the form of the inferior superior. So let me give you a couple of examples from the coaching world, right? So, here at Law Firm Mentor, we coach law firm owners to become law firm CEOs. And one of the things that I have seen a lot in our clients, and I see it so clearly because I remember it and recognize it in myself, is the idea of self-sabotage when the inferior superior shows up. So an example of that can be seen in one of our clients who is a very successful business owner. But one of the things that he is known for doing is identifying himself as better than people around him, right? Now, he's not going to be arrogant about it. He's not a jerk. He's actually a very affable, likable guy. But he'll be in private coaching sessions inclined to say things like, oh, well, I have a bigger profit margin than they do. Or, well, I actually have been in business much longer than they have. Or, I have already gone through acquiring a law firm, unlike so and so. And that sounds like a very factually sound statement. The premise might be true. But what really is coming out of it is this air of superiority. Now, you might say, well, if the person truly is superior, right, they have done something better, faster, first, whatever, relative to another person, how are they inferior? And the inferior part is the inferiority complex that comes through the fact that this person is only identifying themselves as superior relative to their strengths. They're not identifying the totality of who they are as a business owner, and they're not identifying where they have weaknesses that are far worse than others around them, or perhaps they have challenges that others have already worked through that could benefit them. Okay. And by the way, we see this a lot in people who come to, calls with the team and say, oh, I don't want group coaching. I only want private coaching. And when you really get to the heart of that, why people have such a resistance around group coaching when it's paired with private coaching, it's usually because they don't want to be seen, right? They don't want to be found out by others. They don't want to air their dirty laundry because they don't want to be judged. And a lot of times that fear of judgment really derives from the idea that they like to present themselves to the world as superior, right? They like to be seen as successful. Now, for a lot of us lawyers, that is a part of the showmanship of how we lawyer, right? You might be a litigator, right? You might be in a courtroom on a regular basis, putting on your best in show and showing up as the person who has all the answers, who's quick-witted, who's sharper and faster and better than others is very much how you win, right? So you embody that persona so frequently that it kind of spills over into other areas of your law firm. And that might not sound like such a bad thing, right? Why would we ever, as a leader, not want people to perceive that we are the best in the room, right? It's not inherently wrong to want to be the best or want to be perceived positively. But where it becomes a problem is when you deny yourself the opportunity to grow and learn from others because you have decided that you are superior to them. So, going back to our affable coaching client, very much has the attitude of, I've been doing this so much longer. I have so much more. I've done so much more than you have. So, therefore, you're not my equals, right? You're not my people. I don't want to be with this group. And one of the things that we have had to remind this coaching client of is that, in fact, there are people who have a worse profit margin, but who have a much better team than this particular coaching client, right? Or it might be a matter of looking at quantity versus quality, right? So if coaching client comes in and says, what I really am looking for is the freedom to be able to go on vacation and not have everything fall apart. And they might be in a group of people who have smaller companies, but who already have teams that they have trained and cultivated and developed into autonomous self-led teams. And they thus have a much better quality of business, even though they have less quantity of business. It's really important that as we are on a growth journey, that we recognize not just our strengths, right? We do want to be proud of our strengths. We want to be proud of the things that we are able to do, that we do better than others, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it's important that we look at the sum total of who we are so that we see where we have development areas. Because that's really why you sought coaching in the first place. You didn't really hire us so we could tell you how great you are. I mean, that's a part of it. We support our clients. But what you're really looking for is that growth edge, that thing that's going to get you past whatever crest you have reached that you want to go beyond that you haven't been able to as of yet. And a lot of times that comes from interacting with other people who have already been there and done that. And sometimes Sometimes, not always, but sometimes they have strategies that are perfectly suited to exactly what you want to accomplish it. And hearing it through the lens and the experience of someone who has less than you can even be more powerful than hearing it from someone who has more than you. I'll give you an example of how that works out. Just think about when you might have been newer as a lawyer. Okay. Think about the time when you were going to your first deposition or your first summary proceeding, or maybe it was the first time you were going to meet with a prospective new client, right? That experience of being new at something probably gave you some anxiety, right? You were probably a little anxious about it. And when you started thinking about how you were going to approach this new thing that you hadn't done before, you were probably looking at people who had been doing it before you, right? Maybe if you were an associate at a law firm, you looked to the partners in the firm and said, oh, okay, partner so and so does depositions. I'll ask him. How exactly was he able to get what he needed out of the witness who was on the other side, obviously not happy to be there, not inclined to lay out their case in chief for you, and you had to get at it in your deposition? How are you going to be effective at that? Well, if you ask the lawyer who's been doing it for 30 years, you're probably going to get a different answer than the lawyer who may have done it once before you or even twice before you. But some of the most powerful feedback would likely come from the person who did it once or twice before you, because that person is much closer to the anxiety, right? They are going to be able to speak to things that you immediately have in front of you, like how do you breathe through the fear when you start asking questions and you start getting resistance? How do you insist upon the limited number of objections that are available so that if objections are raised that are outside the scope of what's permissible to object to in a deposition, you don't just roll over, you know how to counter that. You know how to insist to get judges on the phone if you have to and things like that, right? A person who's more experienced, those things are so back of the napkin for them that they don't even think about it. So if they're giving you advice, they might give you advice like, here's how you outline the topics that you're going to cover. And here's how you effectively ask questions so that you get at the answers that you need. But the newer person, the person who's done it less frequently, is closer to it than you are. Now, I want you to think about when you may have been, I don't know, 3 or 4 years into practice, and perhaps now you've conducted 4 or 5 depositions. And you're still newer at this, newer than the person who's been doing it 30 years, but you have a little bit more experience than the person who just walked through the door, right? That person who just walked through the door, let's say they came from another firm, and let's say they've been practicing 2 years. Maybe they were at a firm that had 45 depositions a week, right? Over the sum total of a very large law firm. So they were constantly being pinged by different partners to go take depositions. So they took multiple depositions. They have less years of experience than you, but they have far more experience at this particular skill. And so if you are now approaching your 7th deposition, a person who only has 2 years of experience relative to your 5 might not seem like a likely choice to go seek support from, but they'd be the perfect person because they come from a place where they have the experience that you need, and they might also be able to give it to you, give you help, support, guidance, etc., from the perspective of being newer in practice and perhaps even newer at this law firm, right? They have something of value that relates to what you need that doesn't necessarily align with what you think you need. So you think you need 30 years of experience to help you. What you really need is 50 depositions of experience to help you, right? And so in that scenario, you are writing a story about what you need that would limit the value of other people because they have less than you in some area, but they also have more than you in the area that matters relative to what you're asking for help on, right? So that's what we're talking about here when we talk about the inferior superior, right? It's the idea of you feeling the need to be superior, right? In our deposition example, you feel the need to be superior to the second year associate because you're now a 5th year associate. However, If you just stop for a moment and stop the comparison, what you'll recognize is what you need is strategic help on a topic. And this person who might have fewer years of experience is the perfect one suited to help you. I'll give you another example. This also comes from our coaching vault, right? We have a coaching client. She is a very successful lawyer, has a national reputation, and gets cases from all over the country in her chosen practice area. And this particular lawyer has always said and very proudly boasted, as many prospective clients of LFM do, I don't have to market, right? I get referrals, right? I just have a referral machine. Everybody knows me. I am the go to for this practice area. And statistically, this person is correct. If you Google the practice area, her name comes up. Pretty good position to be in, right? But the thing that's unfortunate about that is that oftentimes when she is talking about what she needs, she becomes the inferior superior, right? So she will cast herself as superior in that she's been doing it for so many years. She has this great reputation. She gets clients without trying, etc. However, she is incapable, at least at this point, incapable of getting over herself or past herself to be able to have the kind of firm that can run without her. And that's what she came here for, right? So she has said to us many times over, I want to be able to go on vacation without having to be called by my office. I don't want to have to give consultations. I want to be able to do the cases only that I desire to do. But I have to do it all now because people call here and they expect me. By the way, as somebody who also has a national reputation and gets referrals without trying, I can tell you that the myth that people only want you and will only work with you in your law firm is simply not the case. You do have a process to train people to work with others, but if you don't invest yourself first in the mindset that says people will want someone other than me and that's okay, you're never going to get there, okay? And that's part of this particular client's issue. She has such a love of what she does, and she has so much self-esteem tied up in being great at what she does, that even the thought that somebody else could be the desired attorney or that someone else could do as good a job as she does, even though they're not her, triggers her to the point where she self-sabotages the idea of cases coming in without her. The idea of cases coming in and being assigned to someone else. So, in a relatively small law firm, 4 or 500 cases, 300 more, 300 total of those cases belong to her. Why? Because they have demanded to work with her, and she has bought into that demand as being appropriate because she has bought into the idea that it has to be her, right? Very, very common challenge, by the way, with lawyers, right? Lawyers, more so than not, have this egotistical need to attach to their work. And that oftentimes will self-sabotage the idea of having a law firm that runs without you, because on a core level, you really don't desire that. But with this particular client, we've had a lot of conversations. She's made progress, okay? When she came in, all the cases were hers. And slowly but surely, we are chiseling away at that. And it is a mindset shift that she is making. And she is on the road to making it. But right now, she has a problem where she does not get clients who are, basically cold traffic. So she has a great website. She has a lot of leads that can be generated from her website, even without investing in search engine optimization and pay-per-click marketing. Just because she has a website and she has certain key terms that she's put on there that are specific to her and her practice area. So ultimately, people come, but if they were not personally referred, she can't convert them, right? There's definitely a sales problem there. And we have clients here at LFM who joined us with a couple $100,000 in revenue who are now almost at $1 million and beyond, right? So it does not take a sales ninja to be able to convert clients, right? The better you are at sales, the better you'll be able to convert people. But you do need to have sales skill, and you need to be able to engage with people about your legal service. And for a lot of people, they don't choose to engage in a sales arena. They don't choose to learn the sales skill. Instead, they stay in giving out information and telling everybody how great they are because it feeds their ego to be desired and to be thought of as great. Again, nothing wrong with being perceived as great, okay? I'm going to be telling you that from here to the ends of the earth because I'm somebody who has a big ego and I definitely love to be told that I'm great at what I do. Okay? But having said that, I also recognize that if I want for myself, for my life, for my business, that my companies can run without me, then I have to subordinate my need for positive self-esteem in the form of people telling me how great I am in favor of imbuing others with positive self-esteem and creating a public persona around the greatness of the company, right? It's a different conversation. Both of them imbue the greatness because you started the company, it's your company. So if the company is great, you're great, right? But you have to shift from I'm great to my company's great. And that's hard for a lot of people. It really is. Now, how does that make her the inferior superior? Again, it is the superiority that she is communicating out to others about how great she is, about how she's the only one that can do, how nobody can get her results, right? Superior. But the inferiority complex that is coming through her of, I need to be the best at this, which means even if it hurts my ultimate interest of having freedom from my business, I'm not going to go there, right? Because I have such a need to be superior that the little inferior side of me, the part of me that doesn't feel good enough, the part of me that doesn't like the idea that someone could be as good as or better than me, ultimately gets harmed, gets triggered, and causes me to be inferior at what I ultimately desire, which is letting go and having my company run without me. Okay. So I want to just give you, as we tail out of this conversation, I want to just give you some markers of the inferior superior so you can perhaps see it in yourself and then ultimately take some action to subvert that. Because if you don't get past being the inferior superior, you're never going to build the company that is autonomous and the company that extends well beyond you. Okay? So the first is you have to recognize that constant comparison with others is typically going to be associated with your strengths and not your weaknesses, right? Now, there are some people that are very self-effacing, that almost have a pathological need to put themselves down relative to others, right? That false humility. Oh God, I don't know why you would, ask to pick my brain. It's very slim pickings, right? That kind of person kind of does it in the opposite. They're focusing on the weakness. But sometimes they're focusing on the weakness because they want you to disagree with them. They really want to be told how superior they are. But much more often than not, it really comes in the form of your strengths, right? If you're looking at other people and saying, I am better than that person at X, and you find yourself doing that perpetually when you're in an environment of high achievers, that's a key sign that the inferior superior is at work. Okay. Second up is there's a focus typically on quantity versus quality. Okay. I've got the most money. I've got the highest profit. I've got the most employees, right? Numbers, when you're counting and you're doing a comparison, it's very easy to count and see who has the highest number of something, the highest number of dollars in the bank, right? The highest percentage of return on investment. Calculable, right? But quality is harder to measure and oftentimes is not given the same level of weight, especially in our profession, right? You would much rather stack up your wins than talk about the quality of your wins, right? Most people don't go around boasting, oh, I had this awful case, awful facts. My client is a degenerate of a human that I really think should be under a bus somewhere, but I won. Right? Most people are talking about, oh, I won based on these difficult facts and difficult law and difficult judge and so on and so forth, right? Because you're talking about the parts of the win that are going to make it satisfying, right? When you talk about quality, right? And then when I'm talking about win in this scenario, I'm taking it back to the law firm context, right? The quality of your law firm is based on a lot of intrinsic motivators, things that are not often even across the board, right? I think most lawyers want to be able to go on vacation, but some people want to be able to go on vacation once a quarter. Some people want to go twice a year. Some people want to go once every 2 or 3 years, right? Quality for you is not universal for the legal profession. So you have to think about what's quality for you. But oftentimes, quality for you doesn't sound as sexy as quantity, right? I have more dollars than John doesn't mean doesn't have the same je ne sais quoi as I get to go home earlier on Friday than John does, or I get to take more vacations than John does, or I get to have less stress in my day to day experience of owning a company than John does. Okay. And then finally, you secretly don't want to be found out, right? If you have a sense when you are talking to people about your business that either at a very apparent, palpably present in the front of your mind way, or just a little niggle in the back of your ear, I really don't want people to know that, I owe back taxes. Or I really don't want people to know that I haven't had the same secretary for a continuous 3 months since I opened my company, right? If those are the thoughts that you're having, and yet you are finding yourself either outwardly saying or communicating in some qualitative way, even through silence, that you are superior to others, then what really is at play is the inferior superior, i.e., I want everybody to think I'm superior, but at my core, I know that I'm not, right? And it's not that you're not superior in some way with some things. It's that you're not superior in all ways, in all things, to all people. And the sooner you get that through your head, you can shift from being the inferior superior to just being open and receptive to learn. And that is ultimately how you get the greatest growth as a law firm owner. All right, everyone, you are listening to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I'm Allison Williams, your host, and I will see you on our next episode.